We are fortunate this year to have the opportunity at our luncheon to be able to, because this is an election year, have an opportunity to listen to our Superintendent of Public Education candidates come and speak to our group and answer some questions for us today. And just kind of the format is similar to yesterday's gubernatorial candidates. Each one of these candidates will come up and they will have an initial statement, and then I will ask them the same questions. And we will begin with Superintendent Glenda Ritz. And let me just talk a little bit about Superintendent Ritz. She's been an educator since 1978, and until her election in 2012 as the Superintendent of Public Education, she served as a library and media specialist at Crooked Creek Elementary School in Indianapolis, Indiana. Superintendent Ritz is a national board certified teacher. She holds 2 master's degrees with licenses to teach elementary, middle, and high school in the areas of special education, general education, and library science. Superintendent Ritz is dedicated to working with educators, parents, policymakers, business leaders, and community leaders to ensure that the Department of Education provides the support needed to our public schools to give Indiana children an education of the highest quality. Please help me welcome Superintendent Ritz.
It is my pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you, starting off with a big thank you to school board members and superintendents for doing what you do with the children and our staff throughout the state of Indiana. I travel 2 to 3 days a week, and I have seen most of you in some capacity. I have been in all 92 counties, and when I was elected, I really made a promise that I was going to come out and visit and make sure that I was listening to students, make sure I was listening to policymakers, decision makers within your communities and your schools. It's important that the superintendent really know what the needs are out there for school. So with that, one of the major initiatives that I wanted to put forth was really about outreach for school improvement. Outreach has been a very important part of making sure that we're moving forward here in the state of Indiana and making sure that we're having school improvement efforts. I have outreach coordinators all around the state of Indiana, and all the superintendents know that those outreach coordinators know every principal. And that's very important to get grassroots support for what it is that you need for your schools. It's not really about Indianapolis deciding what it is that you need. It's about working with you on what you need for your schools and your children to make things happen. Every year, we have expanded outreach for school improvement. We have more and more coordinators that we've hired, and we have more services that we've been able to provide. The latest expansion has really been outreach for systems of care. And you may recall we had an HIV breakout in Austin, Indiana. And what I consider happened is the state of Indiana swooped in and swooped out and left children in the wake. We have children who need services, and I was called down there by the outreach coordinator to talk with the superintendent. And I said, you know what, we're going to get somebody down here to actually oversee and try and remove the barriers for children actually receiving services, and that's exactly what we're doing. We plan to take that initiative statewide, another effort of outreach to give that grassroots support from the local level and state government agencies and take away the barriers in getting kids services. You guys do a wonderful job of providing services after school and during the summers for your children. We have access to the children who need care, and we have to make sure that the barriers are broken down so that we can get the care where it's needed, perhaps even at the school level. One of the other initiatives that I've been very excited about is the expansion of CTE. No one does CTE like the traditional public schools. It is what you do and in what we do best. Making sure that kids have access to career opportunities, making sure that they know in their high school years what it is they might want to go do, and lending towards that with individualization towards graduation plans. This is what we know how to do. This is what we do as a public school system, making sure that all of our children are prepared for college and career. I've also been very proud of school safety. And I know that is one of your biggest priorities, making sure that our children are safe. I championed money that came to you in various forms to upgrade your security within your buildings, to make sure that we have trained school resource officers so that we can make sure that our children are safe. We offer required training every year. You should know that Indiana is a national leader in preparing our resource school officers and your employees in your schools to make sure that our children are safe, making sure that they are certified. So with that, I want to say that you as partners, you have been partners with me the entire tenure of my first term, and that's important because Glenda Ritz can't move policy. You move policy. And we have to have a voice together in what it is we want to do and where we want to head for our children in the state of Indiana. And I'm looking forward to actually doing those things. If you've not downloaded Imagine 2020, which is a document I put out several months ago, highlighting what we've been doing in the public school system with support from the department and our vision for 2020, I invite you to go and do that. It is located on the Department of Education's website. And you'll see that the work that I've just been talking about regarding outreach, CTE programs, school safeties, standards, assessments, whatever it is that we've been doing to make sure that we've got supports for you at the school level. So the first thing going in the visionary direction is pre-K, making sure that our 4-year-olds in the state of Indiana have access to quality pre-K. That doesn't mean daycare. It means educational programming for our 4-year-olds. For less than 1% of our tax dollars, we actually can make that happen. We've already identified where that funding may come from and making that a reality. And I know that the public school systems are very anxious to be sure that we have pre-K in place. Less time on testing, and I know I'm probably going to get a question about that, so I'm not going to, expound on that now, but we absolutely have to get the testing system where it needs to be streamlined. And then making sure that our students are leaving high school prepared for post-secondary education and training to actually enter living wage careers. And I just briefly spoke about that. But I'm going to end my statement here right now, so I have plenty of time for the questions, by saying, when we do outreach together for school improvement, it really is a totally joint effort. And you may not know this, but we've been able together to turn around 193 schools from focus and priority status, and you know what that means, the DNF category, to high performing in just 2 years. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens by getting the support from the state level to do what you know you need to do at the local level and making sure all those supports are in place for you. That impacted over 108,000 students in the state of Indiana, and I applaud you for your efforts in making school improvement always a priority of giving the highest quality of education for our children. And with that, I know you have questions.
There we go. As we are all realized coming up to the election here, we had several of our constituents out here who sent us questions and very interested in this particular election and some of the key topics. There are 4 of them that we would like for you to address, and the first one is, what is your plan to address our current teacher shortage?
Well, early on, I recognized that we actually have a teacher shortage, and especially in the areas of special education and math, but really it's become more pervasive over the last several years. And under my direction, the department actually has been taking a systematic approach to addressing Indiana's teacher shortage for the past year and a half. In 2015, you may recall that I actually created the Blue Ribbon Commission on the recruitment and retention of excellent educators to really convene and engage stakeholders from the entire education workforce continuum, and some of you were a part of that. From the deans of Indiana colleges of education to currently practicing teachers and administrators and even state legislators in order to make specific recommendations and identify key action steps to address the teacher shortage. I have designated, we actually put the Blue Ribbon Commission through the General Assembly last year, and it didn't pass. But that didn't deter the work of the department because I'm dedicated to moving forward the recommendations that were put forth from that commission. So I've already hired a person that oversees the entire work, and we've already had some things underway, and if you don't mind, I'll briefly touch on those. One is compensation. There were 8 areas identified by the Blue Ribbon Commission to be sure that we were going to have a systematic approach to always having quality educators in our classrooms. So under compensation, I did advocate for adjusting the compensation statute last year to open eligibility for teachers in their first and second years of teaching to receive compensation regardless of effectiveness rating. And that was a good step forward. It wasn't nearly enough. We administered a grant to support teacher attainment of National Board Certification, and as you know, I am a National Board Certified teacher, and I am more than happy to promote that program in your local school areas to be sure that remains. We will be reissuing that commitment to the candidates and their mentors in 2016-17. And moving forward, the Blue Ribbon Commission highly recommended that the state leave the compensation packages up to local developed compensation models that would include professionally competitive salary bases and increases and expand opportunities for advanced degrees and licensure and career paths. The items that have been placed in law have prohibited many of our educators and many of you from being able to do what you know you want to do within your own district at your local level to be sure that you can recruit and retain educators. And we want that to be a local process. Evaluation and student assessment, improving the local evaluation systems. We actually at the department give technical assistance to school corporations regarding this effort, letting you know that there are things that you may have in your evaluation system that you don't really have to use. For instance, many school corporations use the A to F grades as part of the teacher evaluation system. You don't have to. There's nothing in law or statute that says that needs to remain. And if that's a high stakes that you would like to remove from your teacher evaluation system, then you have other alternatives. Legislative changes to reduce high stakes of student assessment actually linked to teacher evaluation. So moving forward, the Blue Ribbon Commission recommended that there be an emphasis within the teacher evaluation systems on how teachers use data to form from multiple assessments, including informal, teacher-created, standardized assessment. It should be an active part of the teacher evaluation rubric, because that's what we do. In fact, you know, teachers assess every single day. But in the state of Indiana and throughout our nation, to be quite frank, the word assessment has equaled the word test. And we know that our educators assess children every single day, all day long. When they sit down and read with a child, when they're helping to moderate a debate amongst students, when they're looking over the writing sample of a child, we're assessing children all the time. So we need to be practical and with making sure that we still have accountability. That is a major role of our job as educators, to be sure that we are paying attention to assessments and adjusting our instruction for learning. So we will be putting forth that recommendation in the coming months. Teacher leadership collaborated with the REL Midwest to develop a teacher leadership toolkit. We're actually going to be releasing that here in the fall to support school districts in creating career ladders and lattices for teacher leaders. We're going to give you some good ideas and some best practices that are not only happening within Indiana, but around the nation. Positive press. This is probably where I'd love to spend a lot of time, and it's going to be in conjunction with you. First of all, we created the DOE Dialogue Teachers Edition that comes out monthly now directly to educators, a monthly email newsletter sent to them that includes the celebrations of teaching, professional development opportunities, and critical updates on standards and assessment. Positive practices. I know many of you have received positive practices recognition from the Indiana Department of Education, and we will be continuing that effort, and we're shooting for 200 of those to be done in honor of the bicentennial. But moving forward, we need to have a robust marketing campaign to promote the education profession. And that's where our partnerships will begin to gel and come together to make sure that we're having a concerted effort to attract and retain our teachers. The mentoring and clinical experiences, we just hosted a summit for educator preparation programs this summer. Those who prepare our teachers, making sure that we're moving forward with the higher education community, taking on more of the role of the mentoring portion, even after teachers are hired within our system. And then my budget calls for additional monies in my department's Excellence and Performance Grant that actually goes to low-performing schools for retention of quality teachers. I want to add the mentoring component and the teacher leadership opportunities to that work. And then recruiting a diverse workforce. Some of you may be aware we had a statewide initiative just last year for the first time in the spring, held at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. We had high schoolers come throughout the state of Indiana to our Be a Teacher Day. They got to talk with preparation programs throughout the state, making sure that we were going forward. And then create education career modules. We absolutely have to grow our own, and so we are busy at the department working with that. So those are some next steps, and I look forward to actually working intensively on making sure we have great teachers in our classroom.
Thank you. Great answer. One of the issues that we have out in our school corporations, our school boards, and our superintendents discuss this quite a bit in our meetings is the impact of charter schools and voucher programs on public education. And I think we're really wanting to know, what is your opinion regarding this expansion of charter schools and voucher programs?
So in Imagine 2020, you will find that I've actually called for a complete study and evaluation of the school choice regarding fiscal impact, academic impact, and diversity impact. We are expending a lot of money here in the state of Indiana, and we haven't done one evaluation of the program. I am a very open and transparent department. I run a very transparent department, and so you can access the school choice report on the Department of Education's website. I know many of you have, and many of you have concerns about the funding piece. So just pausing a moment to make sure that you recall that 52% of your tax dollars actually goes to K-12 education. 52%. All of that pot of money used to go to traditional public schools. It now goes to 4 pots of schools. It goes to traditional public schools. By the way, over 1 million students attend and choose to go to traditional public schools. Then we have 2 sets of charter schools, and then we have school choice, who are also getting money from the same pot of money. There's 2 sets of charters. Actually, one set of charters is more locally designed, oversight, created, and even closed. And then we have the Indiana Charter Board, who has oversight of bringing in what I call for-profit companies that operate under a not-for-profit status to set up charters within Indiana after going through a hearing process. And then we have school choice. And I say this often, it is not parent choice, because no money goes to the private school on behalf of a child until the private school, chooses the child. So we have a system that's been put in place that we have not evaluated, and we need to evaluate it on those 3 points that I put forth before doing any more expansion of either of these entities. And that would be fiscal impact, it would be academic impact, and it would be diversity impact.
Thank you. And I know just a few minutes ago you talked a little bit about accountability and assessment in schools, and I think we just want you to go into a little more detail as what you feel is the best way to address this accountability and assessment in schools. Maybe expand a little bit on your original answer.
Absolutely. So let me deal with assessment first. I'm actually before you because of assessment, literally. I had a little 3rd grader come to my library in 2012, and she said, "Mrs. Ritz, I don't need to check out a book today because I just did well on my iRead3 test." And I thought to myself, what are we doing to the children, where they think that because they did well on a test, they don't need to do reading? You have to be a lifelong reader, and I know as educators, we teach kids to be learners. That's what it's all about, making sure that they are lifetime learners. So when she said that to me, I had to do some deep thinking. And I actually went home the next day and contacted who I thought I needed to contact about running for this position. Testing has entered our classrooms at the expense of teaching and learning. And we have to make sure that we're streamlining that approach, and we've been given the opportunity to do just that under the federal guidelines. There's an assessment panel that I have been fighting for, and it actually came to fruition at the last session, and I couldn't have been happier to have an assessment panel established and to have in law that ISTEP will end at the end of the 16-17 school year. We have accomplished a vision for that panel. It reads as follows: Indiana will develop an assessment system that is student-centered and provides meaningful and timely information to all stakeholders on both the student's on-grade level proficiency level and growth towards Indiana's college and career-ready standards. Putting this into practice is where we're having the debate, and I welcome that debate. We are to consider 6 things as we look forward to a new assessment system. 1, use of existing tests or components of portions of existing tests, considering new approaches. I want to end the pass-fail approach that we're currently doing. Every educator who gives that test can tell you how the children are going to do before we spend millions of dollars giving it. It is about time that we have an assessment system that shows us where children actually do perform and how they grow over the expanse of the year, and actually be able to utilize that information as soon as we get it and be able to inform our teaching and learning. Reducing time is number 2. I have been working with stakeholders and vetting out a system that will do just that, reduce an immense amount of time. I already put out there that I know it will reduce at least 8 hours of student testing. Reducing the cost. I also know that what I'm trying to put forward and will be making public soon will reduce $12 million to the testing line item that's been afforded. And then transparency and fairness to schools and teachers and students. To me, that's really about making sure that you're getting your assessment information on time, that administration is going to run smoothly, that we have a computer adaptive approach that is actually going to be student-centered, so that you can know that when you get information that it was geared to Johnny, that not all students are taking the same questions at the same time in the same manner, making sure that it happens in an individual manner. And then consider ESSA requirements and consider how student performance affects teacher evaluations. Yes, we do have to consider in the state of Indiana the high stakes that we have attached to a student test. Tests are designed to help us assess student knowledge and if they're on track to be college and career ready. And it's really time that we get about the business of being about the true nature of what an assessment is supposed to be. So yes, we have to have a conversation about the high stakes attached to it. And then accountability. I actually am very proud of the accountability panel that we formulated a couple years back through the General Assembly. I was able to co-chair that with Dr. Yeager, a superintendent at that time, and we made great progress, and we have created a great system of fairness and transparency that truly, for the first time, recognizes growth amongst our students. We've already have this system in place. It has 3 domains: performance, growth, and multiple measures. What we need to do now is make sure that the ESSA requirements are put within our system, replace it with a new assessment system, and still we'll be able to measure the same 3 kinds of domains: performance, growth, and multiple measures. I have formed the Superintendent's Accountability Advisory Committee. I have invited those who served on the first committee and then expanded it to really get about the nitty-gritty of the accountability system, so that the purpose is to improve our school systems. I will openly tell you that I have been opposed to labeling our schools A, B, C, D, and F. And for the first time, ESSA is going to allow us to move away from that if we so choose. We're not going to have 5 categories. Right now, the rule says perhaps we have to have 3, and there's even lots of conversation about using a dashboard and not giving a summative rating at all. Literally putting out the information regarding your schools, and let parents see for themselves what is happening within our schools and making sure that they're visiting. So we are moving towards that conversation in the Superintendent's Accountability Advisory Committee, and I welcome that dialogue because I know at some point it's going to be much broader than that small committee. We'll have to go through other stakeholder groups in order to be embraced.
Our audience today represents urban, suburban, and rural school districts, and We all know that it takes money to educate kids. And I think our biggest question of the day is, how would you approach the issue of adequacy and equity in the funding of our schools?
So the mission of the department is actually to work together to build an education system of equity and high quality, focused on student-centered accountability. It's all about the needs of the children within our schools. I mean, yes, that does involve funding. I have asked, you might recall that the last biennium, I brought my budget forth before the governor did. I tell you today, I did that by design. I wanted to ensure that the pot of money at least had the pot of money that I know we would needed to start off with. And then things started to change as the funding formula went through. So now let me give you my thoughts on where we need to be headed. I've already put forth a budget that will be 2% over year for the budget biennium coming up. I have reinstituted the small schools line item for funding to small rural schools. I am very aware in my travels 2 to 3 days a week around the state of Indiana that the rural schools are seeing great decreases in funding coming to them for a variety of reasons. But the most recent one is the agricultural property tax adjustment that's going to be happening, and that you're going to have to be budgeting for at some point to be able to run your school systems. I know that we need to offset that, and we need to be serious about what that looks like. So my budget has already come forth with that. Equity involves access to technology and a lot of other programmatic pieces around the state of Indiana. I have 3 different areas within my budget revolving around technology, whether it be for assessment, whether it to make sure that everybody has internet connections as they should in the state of Indiana. I do not care where children go to school. I don't care their zip code. I want to make sure that wherever they go, they have access to programming, and they should have the same types of opportunities no matter where they go to school in Indiana. And technology is a big part of that, making sure that we're going to make sure that those schools who have one-to-one technology, and then I go to schools who barely have a computer lab where the kids can access once a week. There's no equity in that. All children have to be prepared to be experts at using technology within their learning in today's society. No, hardly any career does not infuse the use of technology. We absolutely have to be sure that we're there. So that's just one example of the equity portion I want to address. But we actually are going to have to look at the funding formula. And your comments and your work with this in the coming years, I want to make it a reality by 2020. We have to move towards a formula that addresses programmatic equity and needs no matter where the children attend in the state of Indiana. Right now, we have every dollar following the child. And what happens, and you know that it happens, when you lose children, then you have to cut programs for the children that are in your district. And that creates greater inequity about what it is that you can provide to your children. So we have to have a funding formula where every single dollar does not follow the child. We have to have a programmatic structure that allows us to be able to operate with the adequate funding that we need, providing the programs we know children should have access to, and then some money can follow the child. But when you have every dollar following the child, we are actually creating a more inequitable system of education here in the state of Indiana.
Thank you, Superintendent Ritz. At this time, would you all please give her a round of applause for addressing us today?
A round of applause for you. Thank you so much for what you do, and thanks for being great partners with me, and I look forward to spending a lot more time with you in the future. Thank you so much.